So no, this is your webcam.
Oh, good evening, everybody. Is this a little bit too loud? It works? People are holding their ears there. I think for this now. Well, I do not see a following button, so I will just talk softly. So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our forum tonight. My name is Hugh Brady. I'm on the board of the Arlington chapter of NAMI, which is just now merged with NAMI Northwest Suburban, so we are now NAMI Northwest Suburbs of Chicago. And I'd like to welcome everybody to the forum tonight. Thank you to Heidi Graham. You want to raise your hand, Heidi? Oh, there she is. Heidi Graham is manning the laptop. And so thank you to Heidi and the League of Women Voters of Arlington Heights, Buffalo Grove, and several other towns for hosting this evening. So tonight we're here to learn about community health boards, sometimes called 708 boards, and how they work, and what impact they could have on regards to mental health concerns in the communities that are part of Wheeling Township and Vernon Township, Schaumburg Township, as well as several townships in DuPage County. So each of you should have a note card to put questions on if you have any. We'll answer those at the end of the session. Volunteers, we got Tracy is out passing out cards, so she'll collect them. Just hold them up in the air. Tracy will come by and collect the cards, and at the end we will read the questions and see how our panelists answer them. So I'd like to introduce our panel. First, we have Lori Grinelli, who is who's also on the board of NAMI Northwest Suburbs of Chicago, and also has been very active in kind of a leader of the effort to create a 708 board here in Wheeling Township. And we also have Ron Milka, who's the executive director of the Lyons Township Community Mental Health Board, which he says has been in existence since 1972. Yep. And so it's been around for quite a long time. And we also have Linda Springer. Linda's here. She's the executive director of the clinical director at the Kenneth Young Center down in Elk Grove. And we have Rick German, who is the director of behavioral health services at the Ascension Hospital Network, formerly the director of the Alexian Brothers Center for Mental Health right down the road here in Arlington Heights. And we also have Elizabeth Thielen, who's the senior director at NICASA Behavioral Health Services. And we also have Gilbert Allen. Gilbert? Okay, and just say a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, so I'm the clinical director over at Shelters Inc.
Okay, great. So welcome to our panel. So first we're going to talk a little bit, Ron Malcolm's going to talk a little bit about what 708 boards are and how they operate, and how they what sort of benefits they provide to the communities they're in. So you're up, Ron.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let me see if can you hear me without this, or this needs to be close? This needs to be far away?
Perfect, right there.
Perfect, right there. Okay, I am the executive director. As you said, I've been there for about 10 years. Prior to that, I was assistant to the CFO at Aunt Martha's Youth Services and Healthcare. I was president of the United Way of Illinois. I ran a youth agency called Youth in Crisis that's similar to on the youth services up here. In fact, I knew the founder there, Peter DeGree, and I knew Harry Wells and some of the others as well as Peter Canine and the Bridge. So I've known a lot of the agencies in this area through United Way. When I was senior VP at United Way of Suburban Chicago, we had a United Way of Wheeling Buffalo Grove, a United Way of Arlington Heights, and I came up here for a number of meetings in the community. So I'm somewhat familiar, as well as my daughter's teaches at Jane Addams School of Social Work. She's an LCSW and lives in Wheeling on Sunset. Worked at the Haven before that and a few other places. So I'm up here quite a bit. Lyons Township, as you said, we were created in 1972. We were charged by the Illinois statute. Mental health boards are under the Community Mental Health Authority Act. We are supposed to plan, fund, and monitor community-based services for people with mental health and substance abuse problems, as well as those who suffer from developmental disabilities. Now, I'm going to touch a little bit just on what Lyons Township does, to show what a mental health board that's functioning does. We have a levy of $3.7 million. We fund 8 agencies. Our primary mental health agency is Pillars Community Health, which is also the local FQHC, and the Constance Morris Domestic Violence Shelter. So there's an awful lot of agencies under that one umbrella. And we give a total of 10 program grants to Pillars. So it's not just here's so much funding for Pillars, but they have to apply every year and submit a program plan and a budget and quarterly reports, and we monitor that. So they do mental health counseling. We support some of their addiction treatments, sexual assault services, some domestic violence services, and oftentimes it's the mental health component in the services that we're funding. So we're adding a social worker. We give them a social worker who is at the local NAMI living room. So Pillars has an LCSW who's there for screening. So, and a lot of the things that we do are in conjunction with other agencies that may be under different silos, which is one of the benefits of a community mental health board, because you are the table where the other providers, whether they are funded or not, where the other providers can come and you can do community planning. We fund Helping Hand, which is an IDD agency, and they have an autism school and total communications, a day program, an employment program, residential living services, and an aging program. We fund community support services, which does respite for IDD in the home and a lot of in-home services. We fund a cerebral palsy school in our area called the Center for Independence Through Conductive Education. And the Leader Shop Youth Services, Aging Care Connections, we fund the DD portion of their elder abuse hotline, because the state funds elder abuse, but then they gave them DD without any funding a number of years ago and said, oh, now you cover the DD population as well. So we were able to come in and fund that. We also fund NAMI for in-school programs and mental health first aid, and one of their living rooms, they have 4 in our area, or 1 drop-in center and 3 living rooms, and 1 that's being built right now. And we also fund Beds Plus for some of their addiction and behavioral health services for the homeless, particularly before they become Medicaid eligible or covered by something else. We serve a total of 5,228 residents of Lyons Township. Lyons Township is parts of 17 suburbs, including parts of Hinsdale, Burbridge, LaGrange, Western Springs. We go to the County Line Road, so the parts of Hinsdale that are right along the tollway, and as well as going south all the way to Justice and Hickory Hills and those areas there. So we're from Pershing to 87th Street and Harlem over to County Line Road with Lyons, Brookfield, and Cook. So we have some high-need areas as well as some affluent areas. Those agencies provided 216,807 units of service. Mostly those are hours of service. So in some cases it's either days of service or 15-minute interviews. depending on what it is. Our commission operations, our management is 7%. So we're very lean. There's 2 staff to manage about a $4 million budget. So that's what we're able to do. We do a 3-year plan by state statute and a 1-year plan and a 1-year update. So in essence, it's a community needs assessment. We're identifying what the services are, what the needs are. We use Northern Illinois University Government Affairs Department to conduct our needs assessment, and approved it 2 months before the pandemic. So we really weren't able to implement the plans that we made, but such is planning. As you may know, it's a board that's underneath, in this case, it's the township. There's over 80 of them in the state of Illinois. Most of them are county-wide, but in the 5-county area, they're primarily township-based because of the numbers of people. And they're appointed by the township supervisor. There are a few municipalities that have mental health boards. Evanston no longer has a township, they merged, so it's under the city of Evanston. St. Charles has a mental health board rather than having the township there. So in some cases, it's under a municipality, but there's over a dozen townships in the area that already have mental health boards. One of the nice things is that we can fill in gaps where the state, federal, or other sources aren't able to. And you know, in dealing with either DuPage or Cook County, they're going to focus their services and your local tax dollars in the areas that have the highest need. And it may not be the community that you're in. And your community may not be involved in that type of planning. You know, I meet with the local principals. I meet with the local police officers. We can do a survey of the 17 police departments and talk with their juvenile officers, or meet with the park districts, and then coordinate that with our agencies to be able to have programming or address issues that happen in our area. The levy is set locally. Our levy is 0.09%, which is $90 on a $100,000 assessed value. I just spoke at Vernon Township before they approved theirs. They're setting theirs at 0.03. You can go only up to 0.15 according to the Illinois statute. So that's $150 on a $100,000 assessed value. I know with my tax dollars, you know, the $160 or so that I spend on the mental health commission is one of the smallest items that's listed on my tax dollars. It cannot be used to supplement Medicaid services. You know, any of you, the service providers here, can tell you over the last 20 years or more, the state of Illinois squeezed most social services into the category of being Medicaid eligible. So if you're looking for social services from the state of Illinois, you have to have Medicaid, you know, or be Medicaid eligible. Well, what happens to the blue collar, the white collar, the people with a child with cerebral palsy or someone with extremely expensive? Some places they might have a $10,000 deductible. They might not be able to afford the services, or be in a financial situation where they can't afford the services, and yet they're not Medicaid eligible. So where do they go? How do we get staff supported in the agencies who can support that, those populations with a different type of scale than the Medicaid sliding scale or the Medicaid eligibility scale? So that's where mental health board fundings can fill in. We can also fill in prevention programming. Last 40 years in Illinois, they've constantly cut prevention programming, youth prevention, substance abuse prevention, other types of mental health prevention. So we're funding mental health prevention. We're funding NAMI with signs of suicide. We're funding mental health first aid. I myself am a mental health first aid trainer, primarily for police and fire, because I started in the emergency room as my career. So we're able to fill in those types of gaps
We fund a grieving program at Pillars called Buddy's Place for children who've lost parents. And oftentimes they do the whole school, particularly if the parent is a teacher or someone who's involved in the school. We fund a communication program, severe autistic individuals. There's only 9 in our township, and we are the main funder of that program. We do family support groups, caregiver groups. Other community mental health boards do court intervention programs, social workers for the police department, for other types of things, substance abuse court, housing for DD. Proviso Township bought up foreclosed houses and reconverted them with federal funding, and was able to then provide housing for DD that eventually those individuals who were struggling with a DD challenge eventually became homeowners. We also are very involved in local planning. I wrote a drug-free coalition, and we house a drug-free coalition grant. The Pillars is the fiscal agent because we don't have the administration to manage federal grants the way that Pillars does. We were a member of the Washington Middle School suicide postvention program after they had 3 suicides in a 3-month period, and organized the school districts, the ministers, and our agencies to provide services to that community. We're a member of the Mental Health Task Force, participant in Jim Durkin's Opioid Task Force, and other mental health boards have task forces on homelessness, diversity, suicide, whatever that local community needs. And local planning can be more effective and responsive than state planning or federal planning. We had a report to our drug-free coalition within the first few months that we formed in 2015, 2016, that the assistant principal at the high school had confiscated more vaping supplies in the first month than they had in the previous year. So we started parent cafes and a vaping display and other things a 1.5 years before it became really a hot media topic. And we were able to be in those schools. We were able to fund IT and communication and telehealth under the pandemic, and be able to buy items that the agencies might not have funding for. Illinois has a really poor history of providing mental health services until just within the last year or 2. So you might not have services that are available, or there might not be psychiatrists, there might not be staff. Everyone's fighting over the workforce shortage right now, and our mental health board's able to give extra funding to be able to increase salaries. We have people who are moving into Lyons Township because of the services that Helping Hand has that others don't. They have a pediatric clinic, they have screening, they have an autism school, and many of the other agencies such as Aspire and some of the others have dropped those programs. 1 in 10 adults, nearly 1 in 5 households have a medical debt that they can't pay. And it's the same whether it's college educated, whether it's high income, whether it's low income. It's not just say the Medicaid population or the lower income population. So we can really fill in for that. Our Medicaid and insurance rates have been historically low, with caps and denials for mental health services. So we're able to assist in that as well. Now, there's been a real change in the last decade, say, over mental health stigma. Some of that, I hope, is the mental health first aid things that we've done, and a lot of the other education, but the pandemic really brought it to a head. And so there's a lot of support for mental health services, and people are really becoming aware that's really needed. I have a lot of statistics, but I think most of you know and hear on almost on a daily basis what are the problems in the schools. Some of the principals I talked to say the students who came back last year from 2 years under the pandemic have 3 times the problem. That's a 300% increase. Argo High School went from 1 social worker to 4 social workers and 3 interns, and Pillars is placing a counselor there. kids are coming in with anxiety and depression and other issues that never would be the kind of kid who would go to the counseling center. They're the straight A students, the ones who were part of everything and really never had a problem before, and they're coming in for counseling. Certainly with the legalizing of marijuana and vaping, and of course alcohol, which is still the #1 problem with teenagers, that's on a huge increase. Marijuana use in the past month was reported by 29% of young adults, compared with 21% 5 years ago and 17% 10 years ago. The alcohol usage increased by 20% during the pandemic, even though the bars and restaurants were closed. So there's a lot of issues like that. Finally, I wanted to touch base on how effective our community mental health boards. Some people point out, well, maybe it's not so efficient having, one in every township. There's a big difference between effective and efficient. Local planning is much more effective. Look at entrepreneurship, look at responsiveness, look at creativity. You can respond to things in your community because you're on the ground talking with people. You can cross those silos that the state hasn't been able to, even though starting with Governor Edgar, the Department of Human Services was supposed to merge all those silos. But for some reason, we still have all of those. Well, I can sit down in my office and I have the aging, the youth agency, the mental health agency, the FQHC, NAMI, the homeless shelter, and they're all right there and we're all planning together. And I'm the one who has the table. So they don't see me as a competitor. One of the issues, and I've run agencies, I've been an executive director, you have a meeting with other agencies, well, are you going to get the grant? Am I going to get the grant? It's some of the issues, it's hard to form a strong coalition. I was head of Land 58, and we had 3 mental health boards in Land 58, and the 3 executive directors used to fight with each other all the time. Having a neutral table that has resources really brings in the providers to a table that can plan and talk and learn from each other. And you have a little bit of a hammer too, to be able to have things happen in your community. So there's a lot of benefits with that. I am also the president of our state association, the Association of Community Mental Health Authorities of Illinois. So there is a state association where you can find templates for needs assessment, templates for grant proposals, for needs, for budgets, for what grant management software do you use, what grant management, what's the current problems that are in Illinois, what are you seeing with Department of Human Services. I meet monthly with Dave Albert, the director of the Division of Mental Health, and 3 of his staff, who then also, there's 5 or 6 state association heads. So SEBA is there, IARF is there, ICOI is there, we're there, and we're meeting there, bringing our issues and complaints, so to speak, and trying to get resolution and trying to get movement at the state level. We also represent them for various legislations on mental health, substance abuse, DD, as well as issues regarding funding for mental health boards. There was a motion by the Sheriff's Association to take 20% of the mental health board funding from every mental health commission and give it to the jails without going through a board review process. That's taking our act and trying to put it on its head, because we're community-based services that's not supposed to be institutionalized. So if you take 20% of our funding, you're going to have more people in the jails. And you're taking community services from Lyons Township and giving it to a jail where there's not a lot of people from Lyons Township in the jail. So we were successful to get that squashed in committee. In the last 2 years that it's come up, it hasn't even made it to committee. But you've got a watchdog in Springfield now to be able to protect community mental health services, as well as the services of the agencies that we fund.
Well, just a little bit about one thing we've been puzzling with is how you do a needs assessment. And you said you hire a group from NIU to do that?
Yes.
What do they do?
Well, they have a government affairs division, and the name of the office escapes me, but it's Dr. Gregory Kuhn. And that's what he does. I mean, he came out and he did the Village of LaGrange, he did the Hoffman Estates, he does township needs assessments, he does village needs assessments, and he's done about a dozen mental health board. Certainly the DeKalb Mental Health Board uses them, the Proviso Mental Health Board, the Hanover Township Mental Health Board, we use them. And they were considerably more reasonable than many of the private consultants and consultant groups that our agencies had recommended. And they knew government as opposed to knowing just mental health agencies or just nonprofits, because we're a little different animal. And we have a lot of requirements as far as public input and open books, Open Meetings Act. There's just a lot of issues, which also our state association helps. You can also, if you have a problem, you can send an email blast, request it from our coordinator for the state, Jody Dart, and she'll send it to all the mental health boards across the state and say, what do you do in this situation? And you'll get an answer right away.
Just one thing before we go on, there's a little bit of confusion. We're calling them community mental health boards. Excuse me, but they also do them called 708 boards. And that's because when the legislation was originally passed back in the 1960s, it was part of House Bill 708. So everybody started calling them 708 boards, even though they're not here. That causes a great deal of confusion. People think, oh, it's only for area code 708.
No, it was, yeah.
It
It was before this was area code 708.
Oh, we can go on. So our next person to do a little bit of talking, Lori DeMond, is going to tell a little bit about her personal story and what brought her to this activity. Go ahead, Lori.
Thank you. My name is Lori Gray-Dowie. I'm a member of NAMI. NAMI, I'm on the board of NAMI, as you mentioned earlier, for our local NAMI, and we just changed names. I can't recall the name of it right now. I'm also the mother of a son who was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Adam, growing up, was really smart. He was really funny. He was really witty. He's just a charming kid. He liked to play soccer. He had a lot of friends. Everything, you know, he was just like a regular kid. In his senior year of high school, we noticed some issues. I think partly because he was so smart. He was never very good at doing homework. Just wasn't his thing. And so that was a problem. And, you know, we saw some other things and just really didn't think a lot about it. I thought it was just Adam being Adam. He went to University of Illinois Champaign for engineering. He had gotten a perfect score on his ACTs. In math, he got 35 overall. He was really good in math. He could do math problems in his head like nobody had ever met before. But he flunked out his first year. After that, when he came home, he was telling me that he had thought that his roommate was like, somehow monitoring his computer, that he was, watching him, spying on him. We noticed some other unusual types of behavior, but nothing really far out. He wanted to attend a certification program in New York for designing websites. And he needed to be doing something in his life. So I agreed to pay for this. He went to New York. He had about a month left. It was only a few months long program. And he called up one day and said, I need to come home. Mom, I need to come home right now. And I was like, what's going on? He said, well, there's a truck parked outside. It says it's from the water department, but I know it's not. I know it's the FBI and they're following me. Every time I get on the subway, someone's taking my picture. That was just wild stuff. I mean, as a parent, I was like, what is he talking about? And there was just no reasoning with him. He's always been very logical. So he came home, you know, clearly we knew something was wrong. He started seeing a therapist. You know, in retrospect, knowing everything I know now, I would have done things a lot different. But you can only do what you know at that moment. It took about another 6 months until he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And then actually for a while, everything was a lot better. He was taking medication. He was able to concentrate. He went back to school. He went to Harvard College. He actually got better grades than he'd been getting in high school. And so he was doing really well. And that lasted about 6 months. And then, like a lot of people, I think a lot because they are feeling really good, he stopped taking his medication. And then he started getting high again. Adam's thing was marijuana. And I know it's legal, but I'm telling you, for him, it was addictive. He sold everything he owned to buy, because I wouldn't pay for it. And at that point, when he was getting high all the time, I wouldn't let him live in my house. It was really hard. So we went ups and downs. He'd be on programs for a while. Some of the people here at this table may have seen his name because he was in a lot of different programs. I, do whatever I could do, followed what the advice that people from NAMI would give me. He was hospitalized. I had him hospitalized a number of times. The police would come to the house, and it's heartbreaking. Watch your child being taken away like that. Adam died 6 years. No matter how many times I tell the story. Schizophrenia didn't kill him, but it put him in the time and place it did. I found out later, actually I found out when he was diagnosed. I mean, all these things I wish I had known ahead of time. That schizophrenia affects, on average, one out of 100 people. So Adam went to Palatine High School. He graduated from a class of like 800 kids. So there's probably another 7 kids in his class that developed schizophrenia, and yet you never hear about it. So I wanted to do more volunteer work. I really wanted to make parents more aware, make kids more aware, try to end the stigma around mental health, and do whatever I could. So I retired early 4 years ago, and I do things like that. And through my work with NAMI, we heard about 7 or 8 community mental health boards and all the good things that they do. And we're like, we want one of these in our community because we want to have as much help as we can get. Obviously a needs assessment has to be done, so I can't say what's going to be, what it is that they're going to do. But if I could wave a magic wand and have one thing happen, what I would like to see is a mental health crisis center. So that as a parent, you're not watching your child being forced to jail or hospitals when that's not where they want to be. Because most people in those situations, those are not the options they want. And the hospital was the best place for him the first time he was diagnosed. But after a while, I don't know if it helped or not. But a mental health crisis program, maybe it would have. You can't turn back time. You can't. You can do all the what ifs you want. I don't know, but I know that they've helped other people. They can give people a place to go, to talk, and to calm down. Get advice from somebody that's been in their situation. Thank you for listening to my story. I appreciate everyone being here.
And one of the nice, helpful things about crisis centers for the police is the third alternative. Because right now, if police encounter somebody doing mental health crisis, it's either jail or the ER, or as well as just let them go. There needs to be a third place where they can take one. The police like it because there's very little paperwork involved, and they're open to anybody walking voluntarily. family members can bring somebody in and so on. So seems to be a great alternative, and hopefully with the use of 988 call number, we're going to wholesale revamping of mental health crisis there in Illinois, and this community crisis, mental health crisis center would be there, certainly part of it. So let's go to the first question here. What I'd like the panelists to do, we've already heard from Lori and Ron, so maybe we can start with Elizabeth. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and what your agency does and why you're involved.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Elizabeth Dillon. I'm with NACASA Behavioral Health Services. I've been with NACASA for about 20 years. I've been an addictions counselor for about 25 years. I'm also a former athlete, which you will learn why that's relevant when I speak a little bit more. But we're an agency in Lake County since 1966, and we've always worked to meet the needs of the community. So if the community changes, our services change. And we've been what I really consider the one place that will see everybody. We know that people have varying resources, and some people have almost no resources, and we are not that agency that says you can't come here. And so we do everything that we can to meet those needs. But they're changing, and they're changing at a rapid pace. So I do look forward to talking more about a very urgent and emergent need that is facing our community that I think 708 boards could really help with.
Do you currently get any help from 784?
No, we don't.
So next week, tell us a little bit about
The name changes often, it seems. So Rick Irwin, Vice President of Behavioral Health for Ascension, Illinois, previously known as Amita, previously known as Alexian Brothers, previously known as President's Res, Russia. It's a very large, every Catholic-based health system is now Ascension, Illinois, it seems. But in the midst of all that, we have 5 community mental health centers we operate, a variety of various addiction locations, many housing programs and child advocacy centers throughout Northern Illinois. I started out as an intern at Kenneth Young Center. Linda was one of my supervisors.
Yes, I
When I was an intern a couple of years ago.
You're
Couple of years ago, 5. Put a 2 in front of it. But then I got a job as a therapist at the Alexian Brothers Center for Mental Health in Arlington Heights, where I worked as a therapist and I moved into various roles. Served as the executive director there from 2013 to 2019, and now I'm in my current role overseeing multiple locations. But the Center for Mental Health in Arlington Heights we just celebrated our 60th anniversary this year. So we started out 60 years ago in Arlington Heights. So we've always been in Wheeling Township, Arlington Heights proper. Started out like most mental health centers during the days of deinstitutionalization, with a doctor and a social worker as a medication outpost for individuals that were coming out of psychiatric hospitals, state-run psych hospitals, as a way to stay on your medication. And over the years, we've layered in different recovery-based programs, therapy programs, to now where we serve throughout our community about 10,000 residents a year through our mental health center right up on Dundee Road in Arlington Heights. And something that Ron mentioned earlier that's near and dear to my heart. And then unfortunately, tragedy spurs change. So about 20 years ago, we were approached by Barrington High School. They had 3 suicides in about 10 months. And everyone's saying, well, we're all the counselors. Well, when I went to high school, I had a guidance counselor that was trying to get me into college. I didn't have a therapist. So we put a real therapist in Barrington High School, and here we are 20 years later, we have 20 therapists in 20 area grade schools, high schools, middle schools, going to the mountains that are dragging it towards you. When we talk about the needs in the community, I'll expand upon that. But I'm thrilled to hear that we've matured to a level where when I started with the system with Alexian Brothers, we literally were doing tag days at the street corners, asking for change with, like they do with Knights of Columbus. That was our fundraiser. And then we had a golf outing, and our first golf outing, we lost money. That's not the idea of fundraising, but we have to mature beyond golf outings and philanthropic support, which we always will be garnering, into a more sustainable way of funding our services beyond just what we get in state grant and aid. So I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you everyone for putting this together.
So, do any of the various agencies that you operate or hospitals, facilities you operate, do any of them get assistance from 708 boards?
Our mental health center, Melrose Park, does through Proviso Township Mental Health Commission. Jesse Rojas, you may know his name. So that one does, but we have one in Evanston, Aurora, City of Chicago. They do not. Only the one in Melrose Park for Proviso Township. Yeah.
Okay, Linda.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Linda Springer, and I am the Senior Clinical Director at Kenneth Young Center. I just celebrated my 35th year there. Kenneth Young is, let's see, I think for 51 years. I think we had our 50th anniversary last year. And so I have had the privilege to watch how our agency has grown to continue to help serve the needs of the people in the northwest suburbs. We're a little bit unique in that we have a division that serves older adults, and the goal of that division is to keep people in their home and living independently as long as possible. We have a very large division that does a lot of prevention work that was mentioned earlier. And then our largest part of our organization is our behavioral health. So we have a lot of the traditional services, outpatient, individual, family, couples, group. We have doctors, we have employment services, we have case management services, we have transitional living, the list goes on and on. We have seen significant growth in helping clients that are the very highest need. And so when, you know, Lori was sharing her story, Kenneth Young Center is very involved with two things. One, a lot of times when a client presents at the hospital and they have lots of mental health needs, the solution may be, let's put them in a nursing facility. And these are very young people that get put into these facilities. And so if anyone is familiar, there are two consent decrees in the state of Illinois, Williams and Colbert. And so there's a class action lawsuit in which people that are in those facilities are, there's a mandate for them to be able to choose services to get them back out into the community. So Kenneth Young Center is very involved with helping step those people out into the community with significant supports around their mental health needs. But we are also involved in deflecting people from going in the first place. So if someone presents and they have significant mental health issues, we partner with 12 hospitals where they need to call us first. And then we will go and do an assessment. And if we feel that we can safely deflect them, we have a grant that allows us to keep them in the community and wrap them in very intensive services. We are also just stepping in to helping on the children's side of things with pathways, if anyone is familiar with that, where children that are high risk, same thing, that if those kids are at risk of being institutionalized in any way, we are going to be part of the state system, being instrumental in keeping them in their home, in their community, in their school, but with significant supports. So we have in our staff services, you know, serve multiple townships, Wheeling being one of them. And we have a lot of our clients that live in Wheeling Township. So when we're stepping them out and helping them get housing, because we're very involved in helping people that are in care, we're very involved in helping them get housing. So they're scattered all around around this area. So Kenneth Young does lots of things, and we want to continue to grow to meet the needs, and yet fiscally it can be challenging to provide what we'd like to provide. And so I'm excited to see and hope that the communities embrace the 708 boards so that we can do more of what we do, and maybe new interesting things that we can do to help to really help embrace people that live in the community and keep them where they call home.
Thank you. We're going.
Hey, thank you for having me, first off, right? So I'm the clinical director over at Shelters, and I've only been in my role for about 3 months. But to be completely vulnerable with you, I'm gonna take you on a backstory and what got me to where I'm at Shelters. So I'm a byproduct of 2 parents who battled drug addiction. And I was blessed with the opportunity at the age of 14 to be taken in by my older brother and give me a better life. And the sacrifice that he made for me is what led me into the field of social work and led me into leadership. And while I'm sitting here in front of you today, I remember going to my family before I took the role at Shelters Inc. and they were like, "Hey, why you gonna go do that? You can travel around and just talk about your book and your story and different things of that nature." And I said, "I want to help you. I want to help families. I want to help them stay together." So one thing that I can share about our agency that I love so much in the short time that I've been there, Shelters Inc. Has been in the Arlington Heights community for about 75 years. And we're a licensed child welfare agency. We provide foster care services for families. We license them. We go out and try to provide those different homes for them. We also provide emergency shelter and housing for our youth in crisis that's experiencing homelessness. And then on top of that, one of the biggest things that I love about the particular agency is that we have our transitional living program that provide housing for our youth that's going to transition and age out of care. And then we also have our Healthy Families program. And our goal in that particular program is to be able to have prevention as relates to child abuse. So, and recently, most of all, which is what led me here to Shelter as a clinical director, my 2 leaders, the executive director and associate director, started a clinical program. So I've been able to come in and kind of put a footprint on those different things and be able to provide some different clinical therapeutic services for our youth in our homes, and then also different people in the community that's in need. Our particular program, our clinical program, has served, I would probably say all of our programs have served 500 youth and families over the year in the Northwest suburbs. And it's something that we're super proud of. And we hope that we can continue to do that and be a pillar in our community.
Great, thank you. So, next thing to talk about, I think, a little bit is that anybody can pick this up. What do you see happening that's new, or what trends do you see developing regarding to mental health issues and concerns?
Thank you. Yes, I'm very excited to talk about this issue because this is something that we talk about stigma, we talk about shame, and we talk about a lack of awareness. And this is an issue that is not talked about. There is so much stigma. And despite that, there are over 1 million Illinoisans, adult Illinoisans, that are struggling with this issue currently. And this is only known due to the first ever statewide impact study about this issue that just was released. This is an issue that disproportionately affects a number of different groups, including adolescents and young adults, senior citizens, athletes, people with other mental health conditions, military and veterans, our Latinx Illinoisans, those with a family history of alcoholism, and people with a history and current trauma. And it can lead to homelessness, job loss, debt, bankruptcy, medical problems, divorce and estrangement, legal involvement, anxiety, depression, and substance use. And 54% of these individuals in Illinois were found to have also been diagnosed with either a mood disorder or anxiety disorder, as well as an extremely high suicide rate. In fact, of the people that were studied that have this condition in Illinois, 1 in 10 had a suicide attempt in the past year specifically related to their condition. And 1/3 in their lifetime had a suicide attempt or serious suicidal ideation specific to their condition. Despite this, there are 0 federal dollars dedicated to mitigating the harmful effects of this condition. And there is 338 times more funding overall. We're talking at the county level, the state level, federally, for substance use disorders than there are for this condition. And then just to give you an idea of the gaps in services, there are about 70 counselors in Illinois that specialize in treating this. I'm one of them. So when you're talking about over 1 million Illinoisans, adult Illinoisans, so we're not talking about the youth that were not studied or the corrections setting that was not studied, and 70 counselors specializing in this. So there is inadequate support for expanding the programming to meet the needs of the community. We know that this issue has expanded in our communities, but the availability of services has not in a way that is commensurate with that increase. We know that help seeking is increasing, which is great. Unfortunately, if you can't increase your services to meet that need, you have people who are suffering. And we know that the age is trending younger. More and more young people are being affected by this. As a matter of fact, 2 to 3 times the rate of adults is what adolescents are experiencing. And the rate of this condition in Illinois is about 3.8%, but among our Latinx community members, it's 7.3%. Okay. And so what we really need is we need bilingual, bicultural therapists. We need people with lived experience to reach out to these people. And here's where I want to share a little bit about my history. I'm a child of an alcoholic. I'm an addictions counselor. I'm somebody who, I'm a former athlete. I was the United States champion amateur boxer in 1997. And I had a career-ending injury, which is actually the beginning of my issue with problem gambling. And I struggled with this issue for 12 years. And I didn't study this in school. I have a master's degree in clinical psychology and I specialize in addiction, and this was not taught in school. I never met somebody that said I had this problem and this is how I came to recovery. And so my process of recovery was not supportive. It was not healing. It wasn't full of connections. It was full of shame, confusion, and loneliness. So we really do need to support that there are peer recovery specialists that are employed, because what they do has value. To reach out to community members and say, hey, whatever stereotype that you have about somebody who struggles with problem gambling, forget it, because this is what it looks like. It looks like me. It looks like anybody in this room. And when I talked about the consequences, if we do not expand those services, people in our community, people that we care about, will be losing their jobs, their homes, their families, their freedom due to gambling related crime, and their lives. So I am really hopeful that with support from mental health boards that we can have increased prevention. Unlike some other mental health conditions, this is 100% preventable. And it's something that we need to have a much more robust prevention program, starting at like the middle school level, as well as I mentioned, peer recovery specialist services and bilingual, bicultural services.
So you can't turn on the TV without seeing the ad for the online sports. But you don't see the ads
For help, and that's absolutely right. And I have some brochures and stuff up front that you can look at, but in Illinois, just since January, Illinoisans have lost $1.8 billion on video gaming terminals alone. That's one form of gambling. That's not the lottery. That's not sports wagering. Those are losses by people in our community. And so the financial impact alone is extremely devastating. But don't forget, I mentioned there's other things. There's emotional, psychological, even medical issues that come from this, and the highest suicide attempt rate of any addictive disorder. More than alcohol, more than opiates.
Well,
So it is a life-threatening condition.
so anybody else, trends, recent developments? Go ahead.
Oh, first I'll second Elizabeth's comments. Yeah, we're seeing that in our other, I'm sorry, Ron, go ahead. We're seeing that as well, now that gambling is so widespread, and you can bet on anything. It's not just a win or a loss on a game. You can bet on every play, on every pitch, on every aspect of that. So we're seeing that as well. The other thing we're facing, and it's not a new thing for community mental health, is retiring psychiatrists. When I think about the doctors that serve in our many mental health centers, not just the one here in Arlington Heights, they tend to be late stage career providers that are in it for mission, which we love, but they're all marching towards that gone fishing sign where they're going to retire. And we don't have the backup. And people say that it's a psychiatry desert. It is not. There's plenty of doctors out there. But there are so many more lucrative practice options that we have a difficult time retaining them, recruiting and retaining them. We've tried the advanced, Linda and I were talking about this earlier. We're trying the advanced practice nurse route, which have prescriptive authority, but they come at a premium as well. And any way you slice it, the Medicaid rate to reimburse does not cover the cost to deliver. It never has. And as these doctors retire, we're gonna have a difficult time backfilling. I know of a mental health center in the North Shore that doesn't have any psychiatry right now. And they called me up asking, can we go to your Evanston location? Can we go to Arlington Heights? And we'll serve as best we can. So when we're talking about diseases of the brain, you need to have a doctor in the house. It's like having an auto shop without a mechanic. You can only do so much, and we need to be able to treat the chemical imbalance of schizophrenia, of major depression, of some of these disorders, so then our other recovery-based services are effective. So that's what keeps me awake at night, is the recruitment of medical providers with prescriptive authority.
And what we found through NAMI is that a lot of the private practice psychiatrists don't deal much with people with really severe mental illnesses. They deal with people with anxiety or depression and walk in there with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder at least ends.
Yeah, you get the boutique practice, as we call, and they will not accept Medicaid. And so when you're on a Medicaid, plan, we're the game in town. It's also a county hospital, and that's an all-day affair just to get down there and get an appointment. So that's I hate to call it a trend, but that cliff is right in front of us.
It's closer over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
There's two trends really that I want to mention in addition to the ones that you just mentioned, which you can't, as you said, you can't get away from the media without gambling ads right now. It's following almost the same trend that vaping did just a few years ago. We really need to shift our paradigm regarding marijuana and THC. It's up until now, the debate was marijuana good, marijuana bad. And you were either in one camp or you were in the other camp. And you really have to look at it like alcohol now. You really have to change it and look at, no one's going out there and saying we need prohibition again. But alcohol is one of the largest problems that we have with our young people today. And you look at the issues that alcohol has and the health issues and everything. Well, marijuana use disorder was made an addiction in DSM-4 in 2003. And so the argument for whether or not marijuana is addictive was made and solved 20 years ago. Yeah. It's something that anyone who has a professional license needs to recognize that as being an addiction. Talking about DSM-4 and 5, our mental health system is being dictated by the insurance companies. And that's one of the biggest issues that we're facing right now. And we have consistently written white papers from our state association on a number of different issues. Linda, you mentioned Pathways. The Pathways program started under an initiative, a white paper that came out of our state association ACME regarding the fact that Illinois was violating the federal law and not doing screening on all children under Medicaid almost 20 years ago. And we've been consistently fighting with the Children and Behavioral Health Committee to get something implemented so that screening of all Medicaid children did occur, and that's what Pathways came out of. So your mental health board ends up being the local groundwork for a lot of activities that then move up into the state level. I think one of the reasons why a lot of the townships don't have mental health boards is because you used to have a very strong local suburban United Way system. You had a United Way of Arlington Heights. You had a United Way in Buffalo Grove. They did a needs assessment at the United Way Suburban Chicago office. I was responsible for all the needs assessments. We were doing 20 each year on a 4-year cycle in each of the local communities, which is why I got to know so many of the 275 agencies that we funded in 84 suburban United Ways. There are now 5 United Way regions, and they only fund about 75 agencies in the suburbs. They fund on a 3-year cycle and very specific little grants rather than a safety net. And at one time, the United Way of Chicago raised $104 million that specifically went to its local agencies. They raised less than 50 million, and most of it's already donor designation, and they're counting in kind and other things just to get up to that 50 million. We were the largest in the country at one time. St. Louis and Minneapolis and 100 others now are larger than Chicago.
Well, so one of the things we learned is given the youth overlap between substance abuse and mental illness, one of the things we learned in our forum last week was that fentanyl is popping up in everything. And the lethal dose of fentanyl is 2 milligrams. Holy smokes. So anyway, so is that, are you seeing, in terms of drugs and mental illness and that whole awful mix, you're seeing, fentanyl popping up or anything worse? Yeah, go ahead. Go over.
I mean, we are seeing that. I do feel like when I first got into the field as a clinician, right, the inpatient, what I noticed that we used more of a medical model at first, right, and we wasn't seeing things from a dual diagnosis perspective. It was more of just, we'll have patients that come in, we would treat them for mental health, right, but not the substance abuse that was going on. So we'll discharge them back into the community and they come right back. At least now, at this point, we are taking more of a trauma-informed care approach to that, right? Which we're more proactive with being able to talk about the substance use things plus the mental health, right? And see the whole patient and the whole client. But are we seeing that? Yeah, we are at a high rate. And not only are we seeing it from that perspective, we also seen it. I've seen like just if you have a mental health diagnosis and then you start doing marijuana, right? Then it's going to trigger certain different components in the brain, which it's going to bring out those mental health conditions, right? And then we also understand that marijuana could also be used as a gateway substance, right? To lead to other addictions and different things that nature.
One final question before we get the cards and answer some questions from the audience. If you suddenly had $100,000 or $200,000 plop down in your agency's bank account, what would be your biggest need?
I could just pick that mic
Go
right
for it,
up. In my career, I have never seen the shortage of therapists that we see today. And I'm sure everyone up here would probably agree. And the competition for where they can go is frankly, there's just lots of places that they can go and make a lot more money than in choosing community mental health centers. So if we were able to fund, having certain staff that we know we're short in, and we could have some money to augment the salary or even sign-on bonuses or something that could make the job a little bit more attractive, or retention bonuses or something of that nature, because I've just never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it. We have had positions that are open for 6 months to a year. And it's just, then other people are doing the job of the open position, and then it's already super hard work and they're burning out. And so then they don't stay as long. It's a vicious cycle. So we're trying to be as creative as we can, but we can't pay what a private practice can pay, and what an insurance company can pay, and even what a school can pay. So it's very challenging. So that would be one of the first things that.
And did you see the staff shortages adding up to longer wait lists?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And the other really sad thing that happens is that, we don't deal with widgets, we deal with people. And so a therapist develops a relationship with a person and they're there for a year, and then when they leave, that poor client has to be transferred to yet another therapist, and then they feel like they're starting over. And for children, it's it's challenging for both, but it's heartbreaking when we have that turnover. So, yeah, so then that person goes, then they go back on the wait list, or the transfer takes the spot of somebody that's on the wait list. So there's a direct, at least for us.
Yeah, and it's a shame. A couple of years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night with chest pain. So my wife drove me to the ER. She drove me to the ER. Walked in and said, I'm having chest pain. You know, I mean, you know, like flies on that fruit. And then if you go with a psychiatric problem, it's, oh, yeah, well, it's just like psychiatrist in 2 months. Anyway, go ahead, yeah, Elizabeth.
Yeah, and I really want to echo the staff shortage and, you know, we have a halfway house where it's 24/7. And this is a place where people come in early recovery to learn how to be in recovery, how to get about work and going to support meetings. And the people that staff that program could make more money going and working at hospitals, but they're responsible for the safety and well-being of people in early recovery who are at risk of overdose on fentanyl and other opiates. And so this is a big problem, and we need people to be able to see a therapist and not have to fit cleanly into a box. Like, you're a gambler, or you're an addict, you're a mentally ill person. How about they're a person and they need a therapist? And it shouldn't be contingent on funding. It shouldn't be contingent on their insurance. As you mentioned, Medicaid is something that does not cover gambling services. When it finally does, we still have tons of people who are uninsured, people who have insurance and they can't afford their copays, they can't afford deductibles, and they're terrified of using their insurance because they don't want their employer to find out that they are a problem gambler. And some of these people are professionals. Some of these people are lawyers, they're law enforcement, because guess what? You can't test for gambling like you can test for alcohol or drugs. So they're coping with highly stressful jobs by doing something that you can't test for. And then they're afraid to get help because they don't want to use their insurance and get flagged. So that's a huge gap that we would love to see fill.
Yeah, you know, if we came up with a whole bunch of funds and we can put something into the repertoire, and I think it would help. I would probably say, I think that we take a reactive approach as opposed to a proactive approach. And I was talking to my executive director about this a couple of days ago, and I was just like, you know, a lot of youth, right, don't see mental health and therapy as something that's beneficial because of it's kind of taboo, right? Like there's some stigma attached to that, right? So I was telling her, I said, mentorship is needed. And the reason why it's needed is because we can go in and we can start talking about vulnerability, right? We can talk about those basics first, and it's a build up before you go into therapy, before you go into the individual therapy or the group therapy and stuff. So then you have a good basis of why this is important, and then it also gives them opportunity to be able to have role model behavior with another mentor, right? So if I come in and role model that for you, then you're like, okay, I like the fact that this guy is in tune with his feelings and his emotions, and it's okay for him to cry, right? So I think that would be one of the things that I would shoot for.
So the question came up, and I don't know, Ron would be the best one to answer this, but don't, and we've heard this from some people in the community as well. Don't 708 boards duplicate services, or they kind of redundant?
We do not provide services. We cannot by statute. We are a grant, we are a grant making office. I have one staff person. So we have to coordinate services with the agencies, governments, schools, and other entities, hospitals in our community. It's purposeful that we are a local planning mental health authority. And trying to work in partnership or in tandem with the Department of Human Services. You know, we're able to fund prevention programs. We fund one youth agency, it's called the Leadership. It's all resilience and leadership and community service and positive youth programming. That's the main thing they do. And they take kids who just don't fit in the high school, and suddenly the kids have a home and a place to go, and they're on a service trip to the hurricane, or they're on a weekend helping at Greater Chicago Greater Food Depository or something like that, and they plan. They have committees. They decide what they're going to do. It works out very well, and they see people who have a lot of issues and problems, and yet they're learning the skills and how to solve those. Resiliency is one of the big things that kids really need.
So kind of, talking about the lack of funds, the various agencies that you all run, did you spend a lot of time on fundraising? Is that a significant drain on your staff time and resources? All four of you could. I don't know who wants to go first.
Oh,
Rick, you know first.
well, absolutely, and I alluded to that earlier about our initial efforts of fundraising, and I'm fortunate to be a part of a large health system that has a fundraising arm, a philanthropic arm called the Ascension Illinois Foundation. They raise funds for all healthcare needs, with a specific focus on the most vulnerable members of our community. They raise just shy of $1 million a year for our mental health service line to support the 20 counselors we have in the schools. In our transitional living program, we opened up 10 beds just for the homeless unfunded, so they don't have to wait until on Medicaid or have a funding mechanism in order to move in. So philanthropy has always been important, but you can only go to the well so often, so to speak. And I think it's time for us to get to a more sustainable funding source that is a responsibility of all of our communities. We will always have philanthropic support. We'll always have that branch of our ministry, because it brings in dollars that we probably wouldn't be able to generate otherwise. We've developed some very good partners in our communities, because what we've also seen is the donor base has moved away from, here's my donation, United Way, do good with it. They want to see the van that was purchased. They want to see the bed that was purchased. They want to see the life that was changed. So philanthropic support and donor development is always going to be an important part for our agency.
So who else, what kind of time do you spend or resources do you spend fundraising?
Well, Kenneth Young Center is not part of a hospital system. And so our little fundraising department is maybe 3 people, and they do an awesome job. And we appreciate the dollars that come in, and we have a lot of support from, folks that have benefited from our services and want to give back. And that's great. We used to do, multiple kind of events, like the golf event, we had a fashion show, but like Rick was saying, sometimes the amount of work and staff time, you don't really, in the end, you come out with, a lot of dollars.
Yeah.
We do our walk. That's our main fundraiser. And so yes, in answer to your question, yes, it does take a lot of time, and yet you don't want to pull clinicians into fundraising. You want the clinicians to see the people. And so that's where our, focus lies.
Yeah. Well, we don't do fundraising, though we could if according to the state statute, but we really don't want to compete against our agencies, and most of the mental health boards don't. I think except for Jesse, who does a golf outing in Proviso Township. But sustainability is one of the things that you mentioned, and foundation funding is typically a year to 3 years. And I complain to the foundations in our area all the time that they get me in trouble, because they start all these wonderful programs and get the headlines and say, this is the first in our area, this is the first, the first living room for teens in the state. And I'm there, well, what's going to happen 3 years from now? Mental health funding is one of the most, with the 708 board, is one of the most sustainable funds there are. Most of my funds continue year to year. In fact, there's a huge influx of state funding. It's not enough given the challenge, but there's a huge influx this year of state funding. And when I went to some of the budget hearings where the governor was and some of the other departments, it really made me depressed. Because I'd run agencies, I'd run United Ways, I went through 40 years of budget cuts. 40 years of programs that were cut, 40 years of things that were gone. Prevention programs, delinquency intervention, and a number of things, 40 years of hearing Jess McDonald or Governor Edgar or Quinn or Rauner or whoever saying they're going to cut things. The state is increasing it right now, but for how long? You know, how long will recovery funds last? How long will these new initiatives last? What happens when the state's in trouble under a different administration?
And I really want to piggyback on that because what Linda had said earlier about those relationships that you have with your therapist, these conditions are lifelong. It's not like you're a one and done and you're cured. And so these clinicians, you know, they're people too. And if we said to them, I have funding maybe for the rest of the fiscal year, would you like a job just till then? And then maybe you won't have one. So this goes to that inability to really recruit and retain, you know, people who are, this is not easy work. I mean, this is high pressure work and, you know, to have something that is more sustainable, that allows us to have people have a sense of stability and not be drawn, like was mentioned, to the private practice where you get to kind of cherry pick. And it's like, oh, we'll work with people who have, you know, a mild depression and rather than these complex and really entrenched conditions.
And one of the things that now in Illinois is that we've been working hard on the whole 988 emergency response system. We said there has to be really 4 legs to the process. One is somebody to call, that's 988 number. One is somebody to go to the site, the mobile crisis response team. Another is someplace to take somebody, which would be the the community mental health intervention centers. And the 4th leg is sustainable funding. So anyway, so anybody else on the fundraising side?
I just like to give one example that's location specific. To within township and actually at Arlington Heights and actually at this library. Roughly 12, 13, maybe 14 years ago, an altercation happened right on the steps of this library on Dutton. It was a Saturday around Christmas time, and 2 homeless individuals got into an altercation and one stabbed the other in front of children, in front of families. And the neighborhood was up in arms. Somebody has to do something. The police commander at the time, Rich Goslin, and I co-authored a grant. We received a federal grant for homeless outreach, where we put a therapist in a squad car, and the police officer and the therapist would go out to the community, come to the library, they go to the metro stations, they go where the homeless congregate. And we're there to do the mental health assessment and refer and get them into treatment. The police are there so that the individuals don't have to run from the police, that they serve and protect. And the police learned about what we do. It was a wonderful, everyone won. It was a 3-year grant. It's on the shelf right now. It's gone. We don't run that right now because the funding dried up, to Ron's point and others earlier. It was not sustainable. It was great while we had it. We changed a heck of a lot of lives during that time. But now that funding is no longer there. It was a one-trick pony sometimes, as they say, whereas that should be something that I think could be sustainable.
Totally going to apply from this. So my question for Linda, or excuse me, for Elizabeth. How about video gambling and online gambling? Does the kids start doing that? They get hooked on it early on?
Absolutely. So early exposure to gambling has been proven to predispose to addiction to gambling, just like with alcohol and drugs, but people don't know it. So they are giving lottery tickets to kids. They're letting them play sports bets on sports betting apps, and they're not paying attention to what's happening on their devices. We have had so many calls recently from parents who have learned that their 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds have opened sports wagering accounts in their names using their credit cards, gone through tens of thousands of dollars, and these kids are hooked, and they're hooked fast. They progress to addiction so much faster than adults. And so it is a huge problem because there's 2 things that research prove that adolescents and teens increases their use of something, and that's accessibility and acceptability. And accessibility and acceptability of gambling is just through the roof right now, with very little counteracting that. You know, we have worked with a group of amazing youth that have learned about problem gambling. They are going out in the community and talking about it to other teens. I have a young lady who even made a song, and I'm like, I'm obsessed with problem gambling and prevention. And I was like, okay, cool. And I wasn't thinking, like, what could the song be like? It was chills, chills up my spine when I heard it. And so these kids they are the answer, like you said, because they're way more creative and thoughtful than somebody like me to help get the message out about the risk of underage gambling.
Another question, this might be for Ron. How does the 708 board function to prioritize the needs? Because I'm sure 708 kids boards get many more applications than they can fund.
Okay, well, it'd be through the needs assessment and the 3-year plan. For instance, if this is a needs assessment year in the mental health board that might exist in this community, this might be a community forum. And maybe we'd have a community forum or focus group with agencies, with clients, with school social workers, with police. We may do a general information survey and then key informant surveys, and then put it all up on a wall and then make decisions as far as what are the priorities. And certainly we also have to consider that if in my case, where we have an ongoing long-term funding, we don't want to create problems by unfunding things such as your program with 3 years of a wonderful program and it's gone. Waiting lists are one of the biggest issues that we have, and they're closing group homes for the DD because they don't have staff, and they have people on waiting lists for respite, for all sorts of things, and particularly with crisis services. Under a number of crisis intervention theories, you only have a small window to intervene on that crisis and have a positive outcome. Otherwise, they will find a solution. And the solution may be negative rather than positive. So if they go into a living room and then get referred, and they're going to see a screener 2 weeks from now, and they're going to see a therapist 6 weeks or 6 months from now, that window of opportunity is gone.
Actually, my question, can I just piggyback one minute? I don't understand exactly how many people are on the 708 board. Are they appointed?
They're
Are they elected? How does the board?
They're appointed, yeah, they're appointed by in this case would be a township supervisor. So they are to appoint 7 mental health board members. One of them is a liaison from the township, either a trustee or the town clerk or someone who's, or even the supervisor in some cases. They can move that board up to 9 members. According to statute, they're really encouraged to focus on professionals, on hospitals, on schools, on other community members. They serve without remuneration other than reimbursement for travel or a meeting or training. So it's not a position that you get and then you get $300 a meeting or whatever you might get if you've been appointed to a commission like some other boards that might exist. So it is a subunit of the local government that is sponsoring it. Though it has a separate levy, it makes its own decisions on who they fund and what they fund, and then they submit their budget to the county and to the township, and the county just accepts it regarding their levy and making sure that it matches what the levy amount is. And the local board, it's either a yay or nay. They can't come in and say, well, no, I really want you to fund Little League, or I want you to fund, the Senior Citizen Bridge Club that votes for me. So it really is, a separate board. They're appointed for 4 years on staggered terms. So the first year you'd have, a couple of commissioners that are 1 year, a couple of commissioners that are 2 year, a couple of commissioners that are 3 year, and a couple, 1 or 2 that are 4 year, depending on how they split it up. But that way you always have just a few that are up for reappointment.
Okay, another question, how is the mental health crisis center, different from a living room? If nobody's, I could give that one a shot. So, yeah, there seems to be a kind of an overlap of terms, and some people mention one when they really mean the other, and mention the other when they really mean the first. But a living room is sort of a place, kind of a calm place where somebody's having mental health problems can kind of come, sit down, have a nice place, some easy chairs. It doesn't have to be terribly big, and just kind of chill out. And there'll be somebody there that they can talk to. You know, not every page has a really nice one. It's probably maybe the size of the second row back up to the stage. So it's not very big. Got 4 chairs and then tables. It's staffed during regular hours. So it's kind of like a place to unwind and relax. Kind of like that in the living room. But a crisis intervention center is open 24/7. It's staffed with clinicians 24/7. And again, it's got some of the elements of the living room, so somebody can go in there and relax and unwind, but they also get connected with services, therapists can talk to them, they can actually begin treatment. Some of them will have, in my ideal vision, they would have connections with pharmacies. So if they decide find out somebody's been off their meds, or to talk to psychiatrists, would be on a call, or perhaps in the site, and or the advanced practice nurse would do it. And, you know, they can call up CVS and have medication delivered. So it would be, you know, much more therapeutic and kind of relaxing and unwinding. And also people can generally stay, again, in various models, but people can stay for at least 23 hours. And in some of the cases that I read about, they can stay 2, 3, 4 days. So it kind of ends up being kind of like a walk-in, you know, low-key mental hospital. Anyway, so let's see, one more question here. This is for Ron. Do any of the several boards you deal with, do they create transportation services for people that are user-friendly?
That is one of the main ones, particularly throughout Illinois. You think of the mental health board that's in Vermilion County by Danville. Transportation is a big issue. Or if you're looking at the DD board that's in Peoria or DeKalb County, you have people who may have to travel 20 or 30 or 40 miles to be able to get services. So transportation is a major service that many of the mental health boards fund. Now in Cook County, oftentimes the township has senior services, transportation, and other types of transportation. So it's not a major issue here. I mean, it's only 4 miles across my township, so it's not as critical as it is once you get away from the suburbs.
I was just gonna add, we have a terrible time with transportation with Medicaid clients, because although Medicaid clients should be able to call and use a service, the pay, this is at least what I'm surmising, the pay is so low that these companies won't do it. And when they do, they're so busy that these clients will be done with program at 2 and don't get picked up until 6. Program starts at 9, maybe they drop them off at 10:30. You know, and so then what do? We're not going to leave a client in the waiting room when we're closing. So we have been trying to bring that to the attention through our trade associations and CBA saying, can you rattle the rafters and see if we can get some traction here, because these poor clients don't have much choice. So even though it's not a long distance, it's just not reliable.
And the problem with Medicaid funding is that once you sign that agreement to accept Medicaid funding, then you are supposed to provide 100% of that service without billing anyone else. That's considered Medicaid fraud. So mental health boards can't supplement a Medicaid rate directly. So we can pay administrative costs, computers, an overall bonus or raise for staff. But we can't say, well, we'll increase the rate on Medicaid and add another $10 on that.
I'm just curious, could it fund a vehicle?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We bought vans and other places buy vans. The youth agency has 3 or 4 vans that we have, and the township has also directly out of their budget paid for.
So we're at our 8:30
Okay.
time limit. One really quick question for clarity before we end up. If someone on Medicaid receives services that community mental health board fund,
Depends on what the service.
okay,
As I said, if it's something that agency is being paid for directly, but we could pay for transportation, we could pay for daycare, we could pay for some wraparound funds or services for other family members to be able to provide assistance.
I'll give you an example real quick. So in Melrose Park, we have 4 still group homes, 24-hour care group homes for folks that are at such a diminished level of capacity, they need 24-hour care. But what we do is we get some funding from the 708, from the Mental Health Commission, from Proviso, to support a vocational program. And the clients from those programs are the ones that actually do our custodial work at our corporate office. And they're building up skill sets. Some may move on to independent employment, some may not, but they're drawing a paycheck. And the funds come not from Medicaid. Medicaid doesn't cover that. It comes from the township.
it sounds like we need somebody like Radar O'Reilly to do a deal.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
So that wraps up our attention. So thank you very much for our panelists. It's been very informative.
Thank you.
Election day is November 8th. Early voting starts. Early voting has started. I know there's early voting sites at Arlington Village Hall and there's Plastic Village Hall. And one of the bad things, I don't think it's, depends whether you can vote yes or no. But the referendum is always the last thing on the ballot. So after all the big races, after the judges, 5,000 judges, we got a lot of votes. And then you get down to the referendum. So the plan to vote yes, stick it out. So thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
If you need voting information, you need to know how to register to vote, you need to know where you're gonna vote, please go to www.LWV-AH-MP-BG.org and everything is there for you.
Thank you.
Anyone
It was
want
good to